Hello and welcome back to Edin Nuir. This is part 2 of my stagecoach cargo cart set. So for this one we're going to be making the chassis for the either of the carts, because they're both based off the same frames. So once again I'm using balsa wood, and as I said in the previous video, anytime that I'm mentioning balsa wood in my videos, you can substitute it for cardboard. I just prefer using it because it's easily available and I just like the material. Anyway, so I'm using a thicker, so this would be like a 2-ply cardboard if you were going to use it. This is in fact a 5mm balsa wood sheet that I'm using. I've marked it out into 10mm sections, 6 of them, so you're going to need 3 for each of the cart chassis. The carts that I'm making are just double check, 75mm in length and 40mm in width. So all I've got to do is just cut all these out. So I'll just go ahead and I'll cut out one set of them. I'm just using a sharp knife here and cutting very carefully. Remember to always cut away from yourself. You could do this in several passes, but cutting wood in several passes with a sharp knife, you could end up just with like lots and lots of thin slices, and you've accidentally excavated a part of the material out without meaning to. If I could lay my hands on my razor saw right now. Using a knife going with the grain, but for going against the grain I'm going to use my razor saw. Try not to cut into this longer piece, because in future I might want a long piece of thick balsa wood and I would have wasted it. So anyway, not the most proficient person with a razor saw, but it does get the job done. So with my first few episodes have gone up and been out for a short while now. There we go. And I've seen that someone's requested that I make one of the A4 boxes that I've made in the past in one of my videos, so I am going to go ahead and do that. Right. But not right now, because well, I've got a lot of other things on my plate at the moment, and it's cold in my workshop. So anyway, landing the waffle copter again. I've cut these ever so slightly skewiff on the ends, but oh well. We don't need one of them right now. We only need 2, because these are going to make on edge. They're going to make the sides. Then we're going to take a piece of, I think this is 2mm balsa wood, and just taking a knife. And this stuff's thin enough that you can go against the grain with a knife blade. And once again, we're wanting 3 of these. And I've crudely marked out a cutout for each one of them. I've also got to do cutouts for each of the pieces that I just cut out as well. So once again, just going to ignore the other 3 for now, because they're not necessary. Because all it'll be is a lesson in repetition. So yeah, so there's these pieces, and then I'm just going to cut notches out of these. There'll be 1 in the centre, 1 at the very end, or maybe just slightly actually I'm liking the sound of that as I'm saying it. I'm going to move it slightly in, maybe by about 10mm, just for whatever, but it's the reason for me doing this is because it's going to be structural. It's not just going to be decorative, although it will make the whole thing look better, as I said. If I have to, in the previous part, if I end up having to make use them as like an upturned cart, having detail underneath is going to be more than useful. So yeah, so with the corresponding parts to what I'm cutting out now, I'm going to. I could use the razor saw and carefully go into them. However, so we've got the 3 thin pieces of wood. I could do that, but instead I'm just going to measure them up. The wood that I'm using is only 2mm thick, so if I move this in, actually I'm just going to move them in by 0.5. So there, and That, and then the midpoint is 3 3¾ right, and then being very, very lazy about it, I'm just going to match up the two pieces to make sure that they're, for the most part, straight to each other. And then I'm going to use, I've got a straight file, which this isn't what it was intended for at all, but you can, because balsa wood is so soft, you can very carefully and very monotonously saw into it. I say very carefully as I pop part of the framework off, but it's fine. As long as you don't utterly destroy it, it'll be fine. And that should be a bit of a proof of concept. Needs widening ever so slightly, but once again, that's why I'm using a file, because now I can just, using the same slit, and still doesn't fit. All best laid plans and whatnot. Right, well, you get the proof of concept. It just needs widening out, and I've got several of these to do, so join me again in a moment and I'll have all these cleared out and we can move on. Okay, so in time-honoured tradition of recording these, I've jumped ahead a bit and not shown all of my work on camera. So what I did was I've dug the slots out like I was showing you last time. They've all been glued in, the 3 lats have been glued into place. Then there was this piece, which was the extra 5mm column, was laid horizontal instead of vertical like the support pieces. I dug a channel out, much like I did here, dug a channel out here so that it could be socketed onto this lat, and then it's just glued up against this one back here. And what that's going to be in the end is where you would tether the horses to the cart. I've then used a 2mm drill bit to drill out where the axles are going to go. I've already set one in place. I also wound up having to cut a channel into this column because it was in the way, but yeah, just carved a channel in that. I haven't actually glued it in place. This fits really tightly, so I might not even have to glue it at all. So yeah, I've measured up. I'm actually using a kebab skewer for this, and my good old nippers to cut them down. You end up with a bit of a rough edge, so just using a file or a piece of sandpaper to take this down. You could use like a cocktail stick or a small piece of doweling for this. I just thought the scale was about right for the size of what I was trying to make. I'm going to be the wheels are going to be hot glued to these in the end anyway, so that's also why I didn't want to have too vast a distance between the body and the axles. So yeah, I've already pre-marked a point here and a point on the other side, and then I've just got to go through with the drill bit. The drill bit isn't quite large enough for the kebab skewer, but that's where one of my my small files comes into it again, because I can just widen the hole out with that. And I'm not going to show on camera how I'm going to paint this, because it's just going to be done exactly the same as I did the wooden sections on the wheels. It's just 2 different browns, the lighter brown to where light's going to be hitting it. I'm not going to bother at all painting the contact surface where the bed of the wagon or the stagecoach is going to sit, because what's the point? And it could also interfere with the glue bond. Oh, got a bit of a fray happening on the kebab skewer. So yeah, I mean, when I'm making these things, like I know I've used the PVC pipe, and balsa wood is, I suppose, also relatively an unconventional material. This is still being done very, very cheaply. I mean, the packs of balsa wood that I get, where you get box sections, you get boards, it costs a few pounds, and that's all it'll be. You can probably hear that creaking as I'm setting it in place. So with that, we have the axles and the chassis for the cart. Then it's just after I've built all the housing and what have you, probably the last thing I am going to do is actually fit the wheels. Even though they could go on right now, I just worry that they'd get in the way, and I don't want things to pop apart, so make it as least complicated as possible. So that was the end of the video covering the chassis section for making the transport cart or the stagecoach. So the next part will be making the body of the of either or both of them. So it'll probably be a longer video, but I hope you'll stay tuned and you'll join me, and I'd be interested to see if anyone else makes similar items and see your take on it as well. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.